Of course, it's a little damp and cool at the moment, but we'll take it, right?
Yeah.
Beats the heck out of shovel. So, my name is Craig Williams. I'm the chairman of the Republican Party here in Carroll County. I'm also on the State Central Committee, treasurer for the Republican Party of Iowa, and proud to be the treasurer for Thankful County. So welcome everyone this morning. Good to see a great crowd. To keep filling up more chairs like we've been doing this morning. So that's great. Back in 2002, my wife and I, along with several people in this room here, had the privilege of being delegates to the party here, and had to just travel outside of town and decide who was going to be our next candidate for U.S. Congress. And grateful that we chose wisely. I think we chose one of the best congressmen in the country. And an awful lot of people agree with that. People, as I travel around the country and talk to people, they all know who Congressman King is. He's nationally known as a defender of freedom, quite often on Fox News contributor. And I believe he represents this area very well. And obviously, we all think that way. Since 2002, I think he's won in successfully higher numbers at every election. If I recall correctly, like 67% of the vote in the last election, winning all 32 counties. That was in the 5th district, and now we're facing a new district, the 4th district of Iowa, which includes from Ames all the way up to the far northwest Iowa. Thanks, Doug. That's quite all right. Anyways, I'm very proud to call this man my congressman. Very proud to call him a friend. Proud to call him a defender of freedom. Please welcome Congressman Steve King.
Thank you very, very much. Thanks, Jim, for setting this room up this morning, Jim Gusson. And I appreciate the network and the support that we've enjoyed from Carroll and the Carroll County area for these years. And to come here and look at what we've got ahead of us now, this new district, it was, the first thing I say is I regret losing Southwest Iowa. When you get projects started, you build relationships and friendships and bonds and commitments that take longer than the redistricting lines. So we're going to stay with that. First thing I did when they drew the new lines was I went down there and I said, we are going to sprint through the tape and representing Southwest Iowa. I have to give them up in January by law, we know. And the new 39 counties across the northern part of Iowa will be known now, I think, as the Northern Iowa District rather than the Western Iowa District. There are 18 counties that I'll be able to keep. That's the Northwest Iowa that Craig talked about. That is, I think, the best Republican base in the United States of America. And we are part of it. It's been very strong, and in the 32 counties that we won every county the last couple of times. We had a couple of counties we had trouble winning in, and I'll tell you that it was Clark and Union County. Part of that was because I had opponents that came out of Union County, and then Clark County just doesn't, they don't sit quite dead center on the Republican side of the scale. So we paid a little more attention down there the last few times, and we won all 32 counties and every precinct in Clark and Union County where we had trouble winning before. So that's how it works when you pay attention to people. And Craig, I want to thank you for the work that you do as the treasurer of this campaign. You add more to it than just counting the beans. And on top of that, the bean counting is working pretty good this cycle. We're going to be reporting a number here sometime in the future that will look really good. And I don't want to say what it is until it gets rolled out and reported, but our fundraising has been very good for this quarter by any measure that we've had to do in the past. This is going to be a different kind of campaign. This is going to be a campaign of Christy Belsack announced that she will raise over $3 million. She's ahead of schedule to do that. I expect she will do that. And they've already been, for every $1 million she will raise, there's at least one super PAC that's announced that they will come to attack me. So this will be between a $5 and $10 million spent against this campaign in this upcoming election. We've never seen that before. It'll be the most expensive congressional race in the history of Iowa. And it is not going to be a positively run campaign on the other side. That's already been proven. It's already been established. Fabrications are just the order of the day. And we polled the district, we polled the issues, all the issues that we could think of, and I believe the same thing you do. That's what it comes down to. And you know where I stand. I've been consistent all along, and it doesn't matter whether it's Barack Obama as the president or George Bush as the president. When somebody needed to say no to irresponsible spending, I said no. And when somebody came up with a harebrained unconstitutional idea, I said no. I took an oath to uphold the Constitution. But it's not a matter of just saying no. It's also a matter of being positive on getting the things done that are right. And when I first went into Congress, the very first bill that I introduced, it created the blender's credit for biodiesel and extended the blender's credit for ethanol. And that bill became law. The first bill I introduced in Congress as a freshman went on to become law. And on the Senate side, with thanks to some help from Chuck Grassley. And so that has been a foundation for a significant amount of wealth. The hardest part to manage is how do you balance the grain production with our livestock producers and the energy production. What we've seen as a result of that is some ups and downs, some real hard times in some of the livestock industry. Some of that's come back around in a better way today. But what we have is, for example, when I was first elected to Congress, Wayne Brinks figured this out in one day, probably driving down the road, didn't even use the back of the envelope, just Wayne or Ray, either one, do it in their head, and it turns out to be right. But he calculated that the value of ag products sold in Iowa was, in 2002, was $12 billion. And then by 2010, just 8 years later, that value was $24 billion. Maybe Ray figured that out for Wayne, I'm not sure. But ag land in Iowa was worth $60 billion in 2002, $150 billion in 2010, and today that ag land is up over $200 billion. That's a lot of capital, a lot of wealth that's been created. And whatever kind of tensions we've had in the competition between the different sectors of agriculture, there's no time in my lifetime have we seen this kind of good times for agriculture. And when you think about it, we hit those crazy markets in the midsummer of 2008 when gas went to $4 and corn shot up to, I remember, $7.48 cash corn over here at Ralston on one of those days, and it threw a lot of things out of balance. So we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if there was going to be a downward spiral and things that we could have a credit or a currency collapse globally. That's one of the fears that was out there. I said then, we'll weather this as well as anyone does because we're tied to our land more closely or as closely as anyone. And we have weathered it that well. And Iowa's unemployment rate is significantly lower than that of the nation. We've bridged across this, we've built capital, we've created jobs, and we've had with us, we should have with us a real sense of optimism that Iowa has been turning around in the right direction. They got their huge deficit under control. Now they actually have a little bit of a surplus for some of these guys to manage, and I think they'll figure out how to do it. Maybe they'll give Rod Roberts a raise. I think he does a great job. And when I'm watching Iowa to become a business-friendly climate, I think you're going to see less pressure from the regulators in Iowa, more ways to smooth that path in front. Because one of the things that drove me into office was a frustration with too much government on my business. And I started a construction business in 1975. The one thing that I feared the most was not whether I could do the work or get the work or sell the work or collect for it. It was what government regulator is going to show up that has some rule that I don't know about, or what individual regulator is going to interpret that rule in a way that I didn't anticipate and then levy a fine against me or shut me down potentially. And today, there are far more regulators than there were then. Many of them are federal. Some of those federal regulations are enforced at the state level. And the oppressive strangulation on business that comes from too much regulation is here. And some of it goes beyond Orwellian. George Orwell could not have predicted some of the things that have happened that suppress our liberty and our freedom and diminish our opportunity to succeed. We need a president in the White House that can turn this completely around, that understands this burden of regulation and taxation. And I'll tell you, the taxes are too high. As of, let's say it is true today, as of today, the United States of America has the highest corporate tax rate in the world, in the industrialized modern world. That's a cruel April Fool's type joke, but it's not a joke. And we need to turn that around and lower the taxes on our producers and have more private sector growth. That's what has to feed everything. The private sector is the vitality. You need low taxes and low regulation, and I've been for that for a long time. By the way, I've got a couple of pieces of legislation that will be helpful with that. One of them is legislation that looks at all of these rules that no one can get at. And it is possible for Congress to nullify a rule, but by the time you push that stone all the way to the top of that hill with your rule, and by the way, a lot of these rules don't affect enough people in society to get that energy behind it. It affects a smaller group of people. 100% of a small group of overregulated people can't get a rule nullified in Congress because they're too small a group. And so what we need and what I will do is introduce legislation soon that what it does is over a period of 10 years, it sunsets regulations, 10% of each agency's regulations by their choice each year until through a period of 10 years they've had to go back to Congress to get all of their regulations reauthorized. That means if we decide we don't want to reauthorize it, we don't. If you come to me and say, Steve, I've got this problem with this regulation and it's wrecking our business, I can bring an amendment to amend it or strike it out and force a vote on it on the floor of the House. That's what we have set up. And it's taken 3 or 4 years to get that written in a way that now I can tell you with confidence we're prepared to introduce it. That's one of the things on regulation that we're doing. And another one is, if you look at what's happening to put extra costs on agriculture in particular, the regulations of free-range eggs going into California by 2014, or Ohio, where HSUS is out there deciding to tell producers how they're going to treat their poultry or their hogs or their cattle or their horses, and any other livestock for that matter too. And this bill that I have prepared to introduce, what it does is it prohibits the states from regulating the method of production of a commonly traded product. And if it's approved if it's an FDA approved, USDA approved, they can't regulate, the states can't regulate how you produce that product. They can say, I want the eggs coming into California to be egg-shaped, but they can't say they have to be egg-shaped out of a hen that was running around on the free range. And the same goes for ethanol. The California CARB people want to regulate where that comes from and say it doesn't come from corn. Well, I say if you want to sell ethanol, they can spec what's in the ethanol, but they can't spec how you produce that ethanol. That's a couple of the things that this bill will introduce, and I think all of our ag groups are supportive of it. They haven't all signed on, but they've all nodded their head and smiled that it's an idea whose time has come. So that's some of the things to lift the burden off, and you'll know that in the country I'm the #1 opponent to Obamacare. I've spent 2.5 years fighting Obamacare. And by the way, the Franking Commission has forbidden us to print the word Obamacare on our website or in our Frank mail that we get occasionally to send to you. So, because they say that Obamacare is pejorative. And in other words, it impugns the policy of the Patient Protection and Affordable Health Care Act. You all know who Debbie Wasserman Schultz is? Okay, well, she is penetrating into the marketplace. I guess I'm going to have to tell her she should be glad about that. I get along just fine with her, but there's nobody in the country that can better and more consistently repeat the Democrat talking points than Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And so we razz each other in a friendly way because there's no reason to hold a grudge. We just disagree. And during the caucus, I walked off of Joe Scarborough's program across the makeup set. She was waiting to go on, and they were putting makeup on her eyes, so she had her eyes shut. And I saw her sitting there, and I just laughed, and she knew who I was by my laugh. She says, "I know you're there, Steve." Couldn't open her eyes. And I said, "What are you here to do?" "Well, I'm here to advance to talk about the Patient Protection and Affordable Health Care Act." And I said, "What?" "The Patient Protection and Affordable Health Care Act." I said, "What?" "The patient..." "Oh, you got me, Steve." She knows nobody knows what that means. And they do know what Obamacare means. And so now I see that the president has apparently approved its usage because outside the Supreme Court last week, you had people out there chanting, "We love Obamacare," and they had these slick signs that, that are funded by some of those organizations like, come to mind, who else was there? SEIU, the purple t-shirted unions, they always have nice factory printed signs, and they've got big factory printed signs that say, "We love Obamacare" now. Well, some of them do. And so now that they can say Obamacare, I guess we can say Obamacare. I never held back. And in fact, some website went in and counted the number of times that each member of Congress has said Obamacare into the congressional record, and I've actually said it 4 times more than anybody else. Because I want to get rid of it 4 times worse than anybody else in this country. And I think the scenario is this, that what we saw happen in 2010, where we saw people come out that get active that had never been active before, they saw the threat to American liberty that was taking place. They saw this nationalization of our body and everything inside it that came with Obamacare. They saw that taking away your ability to manage your own health. When government steps in and takes your ability to manage your own health, the American people, even those who wanted Obamacare for themselves, said, I think it might be good for me, but it's not good for American liberty. This extension of 2010 campaign comes to 2012. The Supreme Court will rule on Obamacare in June. I am very privileged to have been offered a seat on the Chief Justice's front bench to hear the arguments before the court last week. And it's one of those times in life when you just know there's no better place to be on the planet, and I was extraordinarily privileged to be there. I actually did just pinch myself, not just to say I did. And so I'm very grateful to Chief Justice Roberts for making sure that happened. But what I think will happen, and I don't want to presume I know what the court will do, from listening to the questions and comments and reading the balance of the text that I had a chance to on the deliberations, I think the court will probably find 5-4 that the individual mandate is unconstitutional. And then I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit and say, I think the court, if you know what the vote is, will vote 6-3 behind closed doors that they can't sever the individual mandate from the rest of the bill because it creates too much of a problem. Even Justice Breyer remarked about how they don't have the ability or the capability to analyze what's left of the bill. And all the discussion about if the court's got to be thinking about it like this, 2,700 pages, all of these moving parts in Obamacare, if you pull the individual mandate out, the part that compels people to buy a government-approved product, which I believe that's clearly unconstitutional for them to do that. If you pull that out, can you presume that if it was back before the same Congress, Nancy Pelosi's Congress, would that have passed? I don't think so. I think the Supreme Court knows that. They didn't say that day. So I think Obamacare will be found unconstitutional by a vote of 5-4. I think they will vote against severing out the individual mandate by a vote of, I'm going to guess 6-3, and that's probably going to be behind closed doors, and we may never know. Then you can read the dissenting opinions too. But if they do that, let's not lose energy. Let's look forward that we still have to elect a president who respects us and the Constitution. And repealing Obamacare still is a high mission because it would sit on the books, and if the president is reelected, he would have the opportunity to elect 1 or 2 justices to the Supreme Court, and they could go back and relitigate Obamacare and feed it back to us again. Who would think that who would not want to do that? Our president does not have the humility to respect the voice of the American people the way I think he needs to have, neither to respect the Constitution. So that is a big issue. And I want to tell you that debt is a huge issue. Debt is a 4-letter word. But we need to say it over and over again until we understand that I've got to ask you, I've got to ask the American people, rise up and press all of your representatives, come forward with the plan to get to balance. I said, and just a little over a week ago, Jim DeMint has become a good friend, somebody that I can work with and strategize with across over into the Senate. There are others, but he is the most effective. He brought together a meeting with Mike Lee and Kelly Ayotte of New Hampshire, and Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, myself, Ken Cuccinelli, the Attorney General of Virginia, is also a friend. And we sat there and worked a strategy about how we move a balanced budget amendment, how we get to balance. They have, I think, good ideas on how we get to balance, but they don't have good ideas on how to stay at balance. Well, they do, but they're not, and I shouldn't say this, they haven't emphasized it enough. I want our presidential candidates to emphasize, and I said this directly to each of the presidential candidates that are still in the race, and in particular Mitt Romney week before last, we need you to call for a mandate, to push for a balanced budget amendment, because the will to balance the budget does not exist in the United States Congress today. and I don't expect it's going to exist after the election in 2012, without a president who will demand it. Is, well, how do you do that? Well, when Congress comes to you, or you as the president come to Congress and say, we have to raise the debt ceiling, the condition for raising the debt ceiling, which I think will be almost imperative actually, the condition for raising the debt ceiling needs to be pass a balanced budget amendment to the states for ratification, then I'll sign a debt ceiling increase, and only then. That's one piece of leverage that I think can happen. So those are big things: repeal Obamacare and pass a balanced budget amendment, fiscal responsibility. Energy is another thing I wanted to talk about. And we're up there, what, $2.89 or so, I think is what I paid for gas the other day. And it is the highest priced gas has ever been at this stage of the season. Likely it will continue to go up. I've said a long time, I'm for all energy all the time. I'm for all renewable energy. I'm for nuclear. I'm for clean burning coal. I want to drill the Outer Continental Shelf, ANWR, non-national park public lands. The private lands that we've got, I've got a couple of sons that are engaged in the Bakken region up in North Dakota that are hauling materials in and out. They didn't even tell me they were going to do that. They've been operating up there a couple of months before I even learned that they thought it was a good business opportunity. But I raised them right. They're out there helping produce it. And we need to grow the size of the energy pie. All of the sources of energy we have, we need to grow that so that instead of producing only 72% of the energy we consume in this country, in an energy-rich country, we can get to that point where, I don't want to quite say energy independent, because I think it's good to trade for energy, especially in this hemisphere and particularly on this continent. But to deny the oil coming down from Canada, when they developed the oil fields in northern Alberta, and I've been up there to discuss with them, and when we deny that, they developed that for an American market. And about 3 years ago, the Chinese dropped $3 billion in the investment of the oil fields up there. And I said to the Canadian members of their parliament, whom I deal with, why aren't you out here attracting U.S. capital? Why do you take Chinese money? And they said, because it's there, because they came to invest it. Come in, America, and invest in the oil fields. And, we didn't have enough invested in there to control what was going on. But we didn't have that pipeline to go across the 49th Carroll into the United States. And what happened was, all of that in a 3-year study period of time, all of the barriers, environmental barriers that could be anticipated, were cleared. The states were in a position to offer the approval of the permits. The White House now says, well, no, Nebraska actually wasn't ready to approve. Well, no, if Nebraska conformed with environmentalist demands, that was the switch that took place in Nebraska. The only thing that was a barrier was the president, and for the international agreement that says we can put this pipeline across the border of the United States and Canada. That was the only barrier, and we finally pushed the situation where on a piece of must-pass legislation they got language that said the president must declare whether it's a national security issue within 60 days. So 28 days into the 60 days, the president announced that he didn't have time to study it, therefore he wasn't going to allow it. And, he had another 32 days to get that done. I don't think it takes 32 days to study something like that when it's been out there for 3 years. You would think he'd have some advisors that knew what was there. No one really took him seriously on that remark. It was an excuse, not a reason. And if anybody is still raising their kids, it's important to always tell them there's a difference between excuses and reasons. And if you're the parent, you know the difference. And that's what I've always told my kids. I know the difference between an excuse and a reason. And I'll tell the president that was an excuse, not a reason. And an excuse was so that he could embrace the environmental extremists. And even at the expense of the division within his own party, the unions wanted the pipeline, the environmental extremists don't want it. It's not because they were worried about the Ogallala Aquifer under the Sandhills in Nebraska. There are hundreds of miles of pipelines there they haven't objected about that I know of. No, this was because they don't want petroleum burned into the atmosphere because they believe that CO2 suspended in our atmosphere creates global warming. That's what it was about. The president kowtowed to the environmentalists, shut down North American energy that now, I sat the night of February 12th with 2 members of the Canadian Parliament, and way late into the night I asked them, I thought they'd bring it up, they didn't, said, Prime Minister Harper must be about ready to land in China. to negotiate a petroleum deal with the Chinese. And they kind of looked at each other like, we knew this was going to come up. And they said, well, actually, he's on his way back. I said, I hope he doesn't have a deal. Well, he does have a deal. And I said, I hope it's not a solid deal. I hope it's something you can slide away from. There's a loophole in it. No, it's actually a pretty tight agreement. It's a done deal. So, well, now I know that the Native Americans in Canada will block it because they've got super property rights through the Cascades and the Rocky Mountains. Their answer was, normally that's the case. But Prime Minister Harper has already made an agreement with the Native Americans, the Aboriginal people, I think is what they call them up there. And so we'll be able to fast track the pipeline to the Pacific Ocean. That oil is going on tankers and going to China to be refined. Yeah. But never fear, because if you ever get, this is them talking to me, if you ever get your pipeline built, you will be our preferred customer. And so I define a preferred customer for them, and that's one who makes the highest bid. So we'll be bidding, if we ever get this pipeline built, and we will with our new president, we'll be bidding against the Chinese for oil in Alberta. That did not have to happen. But at best is, we elect a new president and compete. The worst is, we leave Barack Obama in office, and that oil just goes to China, where we then have to go find another place and bring it back in. We can be energy secure. It is a national security issue. The oil out of North America to China. Now, it's just appalling to me, and it's appalling to me that the national news media hasn't picked this up and made traction for it. So I'm looking forward to this campaign. I'm very energized by it. We are announcing at 8 o'clock this morning, so that's 27 minutes ago, that we have a new field general on the team, and his name is Jake Ketzner. He is already running the show. I just got off the phone with him on the way in, a conference call. And Jake is a political advisor for Governor Branstad. Governor Branstad brought him in where Jake ran John McCain's campaign in the field in Missouri, where Missouri is the only swing state that actually went for John McCain. And because of that reputation, Terry Branstad brought him in for that campaign. He's been in the middle of all of that, and now he's coming in to be the field general in mine. And I'm fired up about that. I'm fired up about some other moves that we'll make. And so I think that we have all the plates out there spinning that we need to have spinning. They aren't spinning as fast as they need to yet. I feel very good about this campaign, and I'm looking forward to, and I hope we can, get to a point where Christy Vilsack will agree to debates scattered around this district. And Carroll is one of those communities that I've picked that I've offered from the beginning. I'd like to have debates here. So that, I think, covers some of the things that are on my mind, but I know that it's you have things on your mind that I'd like to hear about too. And I want to again say thanks for coming here this morning. I appreciate it. It gives me more energy to go out there. We have 23 town hall meetings in this week. We're going to go out and cover the district, and we'll fit a few things in between those. And I want to recognize my senator, Steve Kettering, who's served me very, very well ever since I stepped out of the Iowa Senate. In the front row, who's probably a little too humble to step up and take a bow. But, and his retirement is imminent, as we all know. But he's done a great job for you all, and a great job for me. And I appreciate you a lot. Thank you. That's how I get an applause line. I just say something. Do you have any questions? Yes, sir.
How's that UN gun grabber bill coming to register and collect all of our guns?
Well, I see that out on the internet, and I don't see that moving through Congress. We've got an NRA and the Gun Owners of America, both are lined up. They stayed on top of this pretty closely. So I don't think anything like that is going to move through Congress, but they're always pushing from the UN, and they always have to keep an eye on it. We have our constitutional rights, and they cannot be subverted to an international agreement. That's my position. It doesn't mean that they won't start to enforce something, and we have to push back on that. But I think we'll be all right. I'm not going to let up, though. And you know I like guns.
Yeah. Be ever vigilant.
Yes.
Those golden-tongued orators back there. Watch out.
I agree. Thank you. Yes.
My name is John Cook. I live here in Carroll. And thank you for coming to Carroll. I don't see you here. On Thursday, you voted for the Paul Ryan budget proposal. The budget proposal gives a new tax break to everyone earning more than $1 million a year that averages about $200.